Hello and welcome back to our special edition of Processing the Process, featuring both of our artists, Jonathan Riddell, choreographer and artistic director of Riddell Dance Theater, and Allie K. Dakers, teacher, actor, producer, and director of her middle school drama club program. We've been following Jonathan and Allie's artistic process as they manifest in their various creative endeavors. But over the next couple of videocasts, and as we have done in the one prior, we will have Jonathan and Allie compare and contrast their respective experiences, both internally and externally, during the course of their professional careers. And we are going to be focusing on dynamics that, for those of you who've been watching our videocasts, know that we have been exploring individually, but now have an opportunity to delve into collectively. So we left off with the category, how they work. And the next question I have for John and Allie with regard to that is that I know that they both use their work to do, for a variety of purposes, including processing internal emotional experience, pursuing certain ideas or themes, and perhaps the most fundamental, telling stories. But I wondered, do you both come into your work with clarity with regard to your purpose? Or do you find that as the process develops, that purpose becomes clear?
I think that, it can work both ways. You can come in with a clear intention. And we talked in the last video cast about having a game plan. Mm-hmm. But sometimes the purpose reveals itself, or maybe your game plan doesn't explicitly say from the get-go, and this is why I'm doing this.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But I've always been struck by the moments when I look back on a work and I say, oh wow, it's really perfect that I made that piece at that time in my life, because clearly it's so indicative of what I was going through personally. Right. And that may have been clearly on my mind or not. And it's sort of, I wonder, is it part of the mystery of the subconscious, or or all of a sudden in the middle of a rehearsal, all of a sudden I'll realize, oh, I didn't even realize that what was going on for me in my personal life was really playing out in this piece. And it's very healing, at least for me, in those moments where I go, oh, okay, right, and thank you, thank you whoever, thank you spirits, the muses, for helping me process this.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say it being an aspect of healing, or a modality for healing, because, and reflective in that way. One of my favorite plays that I did with my middle schoolers, it was a scripted play, not one that they had written, but one that I love. It's called Lockers by Jeremy Cruz, and what it is a bunch of vignettes that all take place in the middle school world, and I rearranged the order, and there's no prescribed order, but I created the order of these scenes to kind of fall over the one school day, from morning all the way to like a party in the evening. And my focus and my director's notes, all of this was all about transition, embracing a transitory span of life. And this was the first piece that I had directed after the passing of my father, like earlier in the fall. And it was, I loved this piece when I discovered this piece, but it was really kind of when I was writing the director's notes, which is like the last thing you do. You have like 10 minutes before people are coming, and you're like, print, copy. And I realized in writing those notes, what that process really was doing for me in teaching these kids how, like, what is transition? How does it play out in our lives? How do we manage it? How do we handle it? How do we grow and learn from it? So it absolutely can be healing in that way, and sometimes it does sneak up on you, but it's like the happiest little surprise at the end.
Yeah.
You know, you cry a little bit and then you say thank you. You know, and then other times it's not quite as poignant as that in terms of reflective of what's happening in your life, but more something that's like in your subconscious that just keeps running. Like, why does this idea keep appearing in my work? Why does this concept keep appearing in my work? Why do I keep, like finding myself leaning towards these different pieces or something? And then you kind of wonder, okay, so something's coming to the surface. What is this lesson that I'm supposed to be learning right now? What is this deeper meaning that I'm supposed to be exploring, whether it be within myself or, within the world? So I found in those two capacities, it definitely, that's kind of how my process sort of reveals things to me in a way.
I've loved moments in my career too when I've just stopped and gone, oh, I guess that's just how I am. Like, or I guess that's what I like. Like, gosh, I keep making, these choices. And in the moment, it's for, other reasons or specific things. But when I look back on it, I'm like, oh, I guess that's just who I am. And I like that guy.
So cool.
That's a neat thing I didn't know about myself. But it's played out very clearly on stage.
Well, it sounds like even if you do come in with a fairly clear purpose, there's simply no substitute for my favorite topic, process, to, you just have to let it unfold to know how that investigation is going to play out. How you're going to make sense of that internal experience. How are you going to tell this story that you're burning to share, but it's not yet quite clear? What is the theme that's been eating at you? And as you go step by step, I think of your clay analogy, but it starts taking shape, but that only happens over time. So it's where process is critical, I think. Now, Jonathan works primarily with adult dancers, but also with students in his role as an adjunct university professor of dance. And Allie, as we know, is a teacher, works with both middle and high school students in drama clubs that she directs. But, of course, throughout your entire career, you have worked with adult colleagues. I wondered, what is, okay, I'm back. In what ways is working with adults similar to working with children? What ways is it different? And what do you derive from each experience?
Gosh. Do you feel prepared to start that one out?
I think it's more similar than different. I do. Because the foundation of the craft is the same. Sometimes kids are more open and ready to play. Sometimes adults are more open and ready to play. So it really kind of depends on what's going on in the room at the time, in a way. I would say the difference is how I'll teach these things. I'll use different language with adults than I would with children. I'll maybe, not to say that we'll not play games with both, but I'll use a game to teach a specific skill, to introduce the concept with kids in a context that they can really relate to and connect to and feel and get it in their body and then move on. Whereas if you're working with adults, it's more likely they're already coming with a set of tools. And so you invite that, like you do, in the sense of like, please open the toolbox. Let's dump everything out and let's see what we have here. And you push a little more, you know, with older actors, because you want to challenge them. They're there for an experience. They're already coming with the intention, I want a director to push me. I haven't really met too many adult actors that are like in it to win it at this point. They don't want to be pushed. If they don't want to be pushed, then you kind of have to have them ask, not what are you doing here, and get out, but you need to define for yourself what your intention is, because most artists want to be lifted higher than their own craft, because so many of us have these really high expectations for ourselves, and sometimes we don't necessarily trust our own judgment of that work, or we want to hear others tell us about that work, or we want to be lifted and pushed because we need someone to shove us into that, like, out of that comfort zone. So those are the differences, you know, and with kids you're kind of
And we're not in it for the money.
Not at all.
That's perfect.
Definitely not. But yeah, and I'd work at a slower pace with kids, so there's more time for reflection in context, you know, whereas with adults maybe it's like, let's drive, with reflection along the way, but we want to see, like, where can we take this thing all together, you know. So I don't know. How about you? And you have a different type of age group too. You've got college kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very different.
I certainly have worked with high school age, but that's not my that's not mostly what I do. It's interesting. Yeah, college is maybe subtly different because they are just coming out of high school, but they haven't entered the workforce yet. And I'm constantly tripping up, and I'm always talking to my colleagues about this. Like, we'll get frustrated sometimes with college-age kids because they look like adults. I mean, they are adults. They are adults, but
mine are clearly
they do not
like tweens.
Yeah, there's not like this
children.
clear distinction. You don't just walk into a room and go, okay, I am dealing with children or young adults. These are adults. They look like adults. They speak like adults, but they do not have the experiences that adults have, and certainly that you, as the experienced adult in the room, have. And it's so easy to forget that. It's so in my experience, and also what I see my colleagues struggling with is, you know, we're constantly like, why isn't at this level? I don't understand. And it's our job to push them to this professional level. So of course we have to put those demands on them, but at the same time we're constantly like, why don't they get this yet? And it's like, and I'm constantly saying to myself, they're not far out of high school. Like, it's been a year or two or maybe 3, and like, and their world has been high school institution, now college institution. They haven't been like let loose into the world, and oh, this is what it means to have to survive, to have to be responsible for every aspect of your life, and to want your art that badly, where it's not only about like, oh, let me learn everything I can while I'm in the safety of this institution. It's like, no, I'm putting myself through life now, and I want my art that badly that I want every minute where I'm working on my art to be valuable, where I want to be pushed. I'm not here for the money. I'm not here because mom and dad paid for me to be here. I'm here because I need to grow in this minute. And that's what I think adults and professionals bring to the table. It's that immediacy, that understanding of being in the moment. And I think, and you'll absolutely get the students that do have that, whatever their experience has been so far has brought them to that level, or maybe they just are naturally that way. But we're often faced with great talent. I mean, kids that are just on the verge of breaking into that, but they still have that, just something isn't coming there, and that's where all us teachers are like, you just want to, come on. So yeah, that can be really tricky, and you'll certainly find that with adults too. I've certainly dealt with professional adults who you just wonder, like, like, is this just a game for you, or is this really your art? Like, do you think of yourself as an artist, and it's important that you bring every molecule of yourself to this process? I just have to shake off that frustration.
Shake it off.
Well, maybe as you said earlier, when you run the show, if it's your company, for example,
if
you're
it's my
going to
company, that's
select
it.
Those who, with every fiber of their being, want to live, eat, and breathe that art. You can self-select.
Yes.
As you've pointed out, Allie, you most certainly cannot do that, and to a certain degree with your students, even in college, you can't either. So,
well, and that's an interesting distinction to talk about, is fulfilling the experience for everybody. So if you have a core company of professional, dedicated performers, you are gonna direct things a little differently, I think, in my experience. But that's not to say that that's the, then the only way and to then handle kids is to just expect that level from them. To absolutely take a diverse community, people with varying experiences, varying trainings, various talent levels, you can still have a tremendous, successful experience where everybody is rising to their level. You're giving appropriate challenges. And again, you're asking of them to bring whatever their experience is fully to the table. And when you can get that buy-in from everybody, no matter where they're at in their life,
that's the big,
man, that's magic, right? Like,
you're right. I mean, and as you said, differentiation is the name of the game, of course, in all of your teaching, both in your role as an educator and as a middle school drama club director. But I think the way that there's this intersection between both of your experiences is that, okay, you understand you need to take a differentiated approach, but what's common is that wherever you are, that you're going to bring yourself into it, and that you both, I would imagine, are going to create environments, again, as we talked about a little bit in the last video cast, that where it's safe to do that and to experiment and find out who that is and those kinds of things, even though your experience levels differ, even though your innate skills differ.
And it's interesting you point out too, like the safe space, because with adults, you can go to these very deep, dark, risky places and whatnot. And with kids, you're not going as deep, you're not going as dark, just because it's not appropriate, developmentally appropriate. What's more interesting for me is that we are dealing with maybe just everyday life experiences that they're going to be facing and they're going to be challenged by, and they have like this little like experimental black box to play out all the different scenarios and how to handle themselves and how to deal with others and how to react and not manipulate, well, depending on the character, but all the interplay, you almost get a taste of it in a safe environment. You're allowed to feel the things that you're going to feel in the safe environment, and it's like a rehearsal for your life in a sense. You're more equipped with these life skill tools to move forward as well, and you can certainly discover that and build on that with adults, but with kids in particular, I mean, this is an opportunity for me to kind of give them an opportunity to play with what they may be facing at some point in their lives. So.
And then you can send them to John.
No, send them to John. Yep.
Well, we have come to that point that I have to confess is really my favorite, which is dealing with psychological and contextual challenges. And this is where we tend to delve nice and deeply. Now, both Allie and John operate in environments that are chock full of contextual challenges. For example, Jonathan, injuries, illnesses. Every dancer has a completely different schedule and completely different than yours. Infrastructure issues, financial problems, and of course now your role as a primary caregiver.
Mm-hmm.
And,
That's the big one.
Right? Perhaps the biggest of all. And Allie is operating within an educational bureaucracy, need we say more. But you've got multiple constituents who very often have conflicting agendas. So you've got the kids, their parents, the teachers, the administrators, the community at large. You know, it's a heck of a context for both of you guys. How then do your respective contexts influence your approach to your work, and given these dynamics, how do you manage to stay grounded in what's authentic?
Well, certainly if you can just simply roll with the punches, you know, that kind of just sums it up. However, I think it depends, it always then depends on what those punches are and what is your end game. You know, if your purpose is just to have I say just, but to have a positive and nurturing experience creating art with a group of people, well, great, you can navigate those pitfalls a little more readily because you don't have like this demand for a product at the end. If the product is your goal, let's say your show is going up and it's has these expectations around it to be of a certain level, and the critics are coming and blah blah all that stuff, then there's a very different demand on the process, and hopefully then your performers know that from the get-go and are committed to doing the work no matter what, which means if an injury occurs, if prom happens and suddenly someone's not at the rehearsal, they're then going to put in the extra homework and the time to get it done, but you don't always get that. So I think similar to what we said with the topic earlier, it kind of depends on the buy-in of your group and the chemistry of your group. Is this a strong group, dedicated, committed to the end game no matter what? Awesome, then we can weather this storm together. If you have a wishy-washy situation, that's when real panic sets in.
It is, it's true. That's when little things can become big things and real roadblocks in your way. And I this past year I really had to deal with a lot of different roadblocks, particularly like attendance and not the buy-in. I think it was more like the realization that there was a show at some point by some students.
Oh, yes.
Like, guys, it's just gonna happen. Like, you're really gonna be up there. Some kids were very aware and appropriately freaked out at the appropriate time to be freaked out, and other kids were still like, but I have basketball, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
My favorite is when you're like, you know what a tech rehearsal means, right?
And
like that means the show is nigh. The show is around the corner.
Yes.
It's not months from now. It's happening next week. So your work should be done. It should be done.
It should have been done. And I did deal with that this year. I dealt with kids that were so green and had no idea that this was a part of the process, despite me mentioning it and sending
every
things
day,
home
several
and always
times
talking about it from the moment they walked in like September, October. But with regard to like the other elements, you know, the educational bureaucracy, things that, you know, you just can't really get around or that you deal with, I've been fairly fortunate in where I do my work. There wasn't really anything. There was a program prior, at least at the middle school level. I will say it existed. I don't know that it was as comparable to like what I'm doing in the style that I'm doing it. And I've been in the same place for, 13 years or something now. Like, I've had a lot of freedom. I think people in general, like those groups you mentioned, and the the people in charge, it was moving along. It was a positive experience for those that were participating. I'm sure you have snags here and there, but I've had a lot of freedom to kind of shape things the way that I want to, and to be able to kind of like start over in different ways, or pass torches and develop a new program and all of these things. So I've done the best that I could to make sure the program is as authentic as I need it to be for me as the artist behind the project. I've done everything that I could to like be true to the intention of what the work is, and at the end of the day, I don't want to say I don't care about the administrators and the parents and the community. I want the kids to get what they need out of this. So I will fight for that. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I also have learned that you have to make sure that you're keeping the right people happy. Or at least not making the wrong people upset, I guess would be more, I think that's probably more like what it is. And I've been very lucky. I have been very lucky. A lot of my issues that I deal with are more like, the smaller things that are very inconvenient. We can work around. It does take everybody pulling together to make these things happen. But to be in a place that respects and the arts and does value the existence of such programs, I'm happy that I'm able and to shape it in the way that I want it to be. I wasn't prescribed something and said do this. It was like, this is for you to do, and I was like, oh, what are we gonna make this year? You know what I mean? So I don't know. I've been lucky. I've been very lucky in that respect. So.
Well, I think it's a follow-up to this contextual challenge idea. You both have spoken about the very high expectations that you have of yourself and of your work in your professional roles. And I wonder, how do you adjust those expectations to account for complex contextual dynamics that you might have known about or might not? And when you really do take these contextual elements into consideration, how then does that affect the way you assess your work?
Well, I am not always the best at assessing my work within the context. I still prefer, for better or for worse, to assess it for what it is and not based on its context. And for me, that's been the harsh reality of being an artist is, it is that, what happens on stage is what happens on stage, and the audience doesn't necessarily have context for that. Now, of course, you can't please everybody, and you can't control what they see and how they interpret it. So even if the dance goes off exactly the way you wanted it to, that doesn't mean the people sitting in the audience saw what you want them to see. They're bringing their own life experience to the theater with them. All of the art they've seen in the past is what they're comparing your art to, whether they realize it or not. So who knows if they're getting the cultural reference that you've thrown out there, or if they get your little unique spin on this otherwise very done idea. So all of that, I'm okay with if I feel really strong about the piece. If I feel like I've done my job and the piece is where I want it to be, great, then I'm bulletproof. If I still have things that I feel are important that I need to fix, then there is not a compliment in the world. That's not true. I love glowing compliments, and they do heal. They do heal a lot of wounds. But I would need like every person in the theater to somehow say, great work, Jonathan. I really loved these elements of your piece, for me to feel like, oh, maybe the piece is really good. Like, it would take a barrage of positivity and love to change what I felt about the work. So if I feel the work is still not ripe, then and every bullet that then came of critique, it will be devastating. Will be devastating. And to me, it's the time factor. It's the fact that I'm not in a place in my life where, like, if I put a piece up, I now know, okay, and now it's going to run for 6 weeks, or it, you know, could go for a year. So one, that's still time for me to play with it, but it's also time for, you know, culture to shift and people to see it multiple times. It's like, no, it's like I put up a show, it maybe goes for 3 nights and then that's it.
Yep.
So that was the one shot, and it didn't get finished, or it just fell flat, and that's it. And now that's, unless I revive it next year and do it again, or 10 years from now do it again, that's where I historically brought the piece. So to me, that can very easily translate to failure in my mind, which is devastating. And then the flip side, when you feel good and you feel bulletproof and it goes, you're like, that's it. I've made history with my awesome piece. Best dance ever by me. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
But not so easy
But
to pull
not so easy.
off, given
And-
these
Yeah.
contextual dynamics over which you have very limited control.
Yeah, and the more when you can, again, roll with the punches and relax, then you can make the shifts along the way so that whatever you're putting on stage is you still feel good about. But, you know, that can be dicey, I think, when the pressure's on, that's been my experience. Sometimes I'm able to do that, and I say, oh, well, I just make X, Y, and Z shifts to the piece, you know, because so-and-so missed rehearsal, or because so-and-so is injured, or whatever. But we made the tweaks and the piece still looks great. That could happen, or it could be, I don't know, that role was pivotal and now it's not there and I didn't have time to fix it. And the show went up and people saw it and they left kind of going, something was missing. And they don't know it's because so-and-so broke her foot, you know, like, who knows? So there, that ends my little emotional vomit for the moment.
But I'm sure that's
It's
probably more common, common than not.
Yeah, I definitely see what should have been. I definitely see what didn't get done first. I definitely see, a misplaced prop first. Like, I see these details so right there, like a spotlight shine right on it. I feel like I missed a mark. I didn't meet my potential in some way. And then
it's hard as when you're directing it to not feel like every mistake was yours.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like,
well, I literally feel like I did not do my job because someone forgot, the hula hoop. Like, it's ridiculous.
Like it was your job to remind them for the 1000th time,
it's ridiculous.
or to make them really understand why it was important.
Yes, exactly.
Like,
no, I hear you. And I'm getting better at it. I'm really, really, really getting better at it as I've matured as an artist, as I've matured as a teacher, of kids of ranging skills and whatnot. It helps when I, in really bold letters, say, written and directed by the students. Like, but clearly we know there is someone is playing the strings, of course. So what I've been working on these past few years has really been working on the compassion side for myself, and the forgiveness for myself, and the letting it go for myself. And I can authentically say that the negativity is starting to kind of clear and the positivity is coming more to the foreground. This year was a challenge.
Oh, yeah.
It really was. And so this tested me this year because for me this year, we had so many more kids than usual, so many new kids than we've had in the past. And this year, compared to other years, our alignment of physically being there was not as intact, like attendance-wise, due to their schedules and things that have changed for them this year. Than I've had in the past too. So I literally had less time with them. So there were these contextual things that I had to say, there's no way that I could have done this, and this to this degree, and it still was good. Like I thought they did a beautiful job. And I at the end, when I look in their eyes and see they believe that they did a beautiful job, it reminds me, oh yeah, I did a good job. All right, yeah. But yeah, there's definitely, no matter what. I mean, I always see the negative first, and then I say no.
Yeah.
This all wasn't to point out negative things. You know what I mean? So now I'm much better with it, but it's there.
Yeah, and it is. It's sometimes I have to prepare myself. Going into watching a show I've directed to, I have to remind myself, okay, now change the veil that's over your eyes.
Absolutely.
To, maybe put on the rose-colored glasses just a little bit.
Maybe.
To say okay, whatever was the rehearsal process up until now I'm just going to sit and enjoy. And it's tricky because if you still have the role of okay, I have to take notes and give them notes for the next time.
Well, see, that's interesting because you get to sit and enjoy. Well, not that you're just sitting there enjoying.
Yeah,
but
it'll
I'm calling
depend.
a show, so
yeah.
I'm still if I miss
you're in
this
it.
cue, then I have messed this up for them. They're waiting for this cue. I don't and so there's that added level where literally it is potentially my fault.
Well, and the changing of hats.
I don't even know if I could sit and watch.
The hat changing is a whole other...
that's a process in
itself. Put that down for topics to discuss.
Yeah.
I will do that.
Because, if you are unaware of what hat... if you've left the old hat on and you haven't switched it, but suddenly you're thrust into that role, that'll just mess you up.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes I do get to sit back. But really, it's a choice because always as the director, you always can take notes and give notes. It's your absolute right. And there are performances where I've had to boldly say, I am not going to take any notes. I am just sitting back. I am going to become an audience member. I am determined to enjoy this piece.
We'll just watch.
Just for what it is. And I'm going to appreciate all the hard work that went into it. And but I have to go through that little...
Yeah, even I do as well. Even when I'm calling a show on performance day, I definitely, that moment of that time in the booth is different from the last tech we just had. I also shift gears, and I remind myself of the speech that I give them is that, you love this. You love this. But I,
remember
I
why
always
you're doing
ask
this.
them. I always ask them. It's part of our ritual, if you will, before opening night, just touching base, tapping into that place of why you're here in the first place. So for me, while I might be like 5 minutes before, once it's Q1 go or whatever, then it's all right, and then I'm in it, and we're playing the game too. Yeah. So yes, I can reflect negatively if I've made a mistake, but in context and the action of it, I'm playing too. So as long as they put that right thing on the table, the right.
But I think what we're both saying though is it's not automatic.
No, it's not. It's an effortful thing. It's an effortful thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and this does lead us into our last question of this section 2 of our video casts, one of my favorites. Over the course of our work together, we've spent a good deal of time identifying and starting to deconstruct a lot of preconceived ideas. And these ideas can be about yourself personally, professionally, or about your work. And we often, or I often, refer to them as the shoulds. So, to close out today's session, Allie and John, what shoulds are really pressing on you these days?
That
I should know everything.
yeah, definitely that I should know everything.
I should have everything under control.
And my performers should just know what I want and give it to me. I think it is that perfectionist side, and this and ambition run wild, like, and everything I make must be so awesome that like audiences walk away just utterly transformed and like their minds have been blown. They will never look at art the same way again. You know, my effect on the world, like I've caused trees to grow and blossom, you know, like just, you know, just this like, I mean, absolutely like godlike status of like my powers as a creator, you know, and that is nothing that I could ever hope to live up to. But like, you know, we all dream. Like when we close our eyes and dream, that's what comes up. And then there are the days where I'm much more grounded and I'm humble and I'm just grateful to be making anything, you know, and thrilled by that process. And then what comes out is, of course, delightful and wonderful and full of creativity. And, you know, I have to remember that the more I am real, that my, you know, humanity is marvelous. And so the more I'm just a real human, then what we make is marvelous. But yeah, those shoulds, they get you. They get you.
Yeah. Yeah, I tend to struggle with that. I should be able to solve any problem that comes my way. I shouldn't have to redirect my course, even though it's intrinsic to my process as we stay fluid. Like we have to in order to discover the best possible organically cultivated piece that we come up with, you know? So it's really more like I should not deem myself a failure if I have to derail and like build the train and build the tracks again and, you know, literally like carve a hole through a mountain to get through where we're going. But lately it's, you know, it's been, I should be able to do everything.
Yeah.
That's what this year
And
was
to
for me.
enjoy it.
Yeah.
For me, it's the
but it was the moments
why
where
aren't
I
I
did not.
enjoying this?
Yeah.
And like, if I really loved it, like we talk about like the infrastructure and like having to fundraise and having to promote your work, and if I were, you know, if I were truly driven, I would enjoy that. What?
Yeah, I'm reminded that
but
that's
that
not
is
reality.
constantly on my heart and mind.
Yeah.
And we've
Lot of
been
shoulds.
chipping away at these ideas, and I think they've both made tremendous progress toward that. But you can see, that's why I asked, what shoulds are still kind of hanging out? I mean, maybe it's lifelong. It's really a process that's lifelong.
It is.
Well,
and I'm in a great place right now because, but I'll tell you why. And I think it's because I'm exploring such new media for me that expectations are very low.
It's not a bad
I
place
still
to
have
begin.
exactly. I still have my huge dreams of where I want these projects to go, but I'm writing and singing songs, and I'm working on children's books. Nobody expects a dancer to do that and a choreographer to do that, so I can kind of just be free to do whatever I want, and to So right now I don't have all of the expectations of, oh, but I've really studied this the way I do with dance. Like I've studied that. I have degrees in that. I have, I have a vast network of professionals who who are both family to me, and at the same time I want to impress. I don't have those peers in these genres yet. It'll be a blessing and a curse when I do, but like there's such a freedom to where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
Also with
it's like you can't really make mistakes right now because there was nothing to compare it to and within the context of your own work.
I also have the beautiful benefit of drawing upon all of my dance experience to say, well, I know what that is. I certainly know what it is to produce a professional work. So I have to apply all the positives of that to this new stuff and just have fun with it. And at the same time being full-time daddy, which I am right now, that was a huge struggle to embrace this notion that, okay, my work just is not my life priority right now. And that was a devastating change to go through. I just have to be honest about that in terms of what it meant for my career and myself as an artist. Of course, it's a fantastic and marvelous change to go through as a person. But once I've really embraced that and to say, okay, well, my art is backburnered to a certain degree, I'm just thrilled about whatever comes up. And whatever I'm able to do, it's just bonus and gravy. When I really do set my sights on my children and my family, then that allows all the creativity to be this beautiful whipped cream on top. If I put the priorities in the wrong order, I'm just a frustrated human being. And that's bizarre. It's crazy, but it's been my experience in the last few years.
Well, we'll have an opportunity actually to pick up on something you said, John, in our subsequent video cast, which is, again, a little sneak preview, noting similarities between genres and talking about the approaches you both take as you delve into new areas and finding, I think, that there are a lot of similarities and you come to it in ways that are very familiar. So we will get to that, but not before we finish up these psychological landscape questions. You're not going to escape that. So thank you once again for being with us for part 2 of our Artist Roundtable. Stay tuned for our next one when we get into the areas I just described and more. Thank you for joining us, and Allie and Jonathan.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.